Welcome to Somerset Showcase, and today we are going to be talking about the annual town meeting with Selectman Chair Alan Smith and Town Administrator Mark Ullucci. And gentlemen, we have a lot to talk about because there are a lot of articles on this town meeting warrant.
There is. I appreciate you having us, George.
So can we go over them?
Sure. Do you have any order you want to start, or you want to let me choose?
You can choose.
All right, so I'm going to skip the first few articles because it's pretty much routine town business, Article 1, 2, and 3. I think the first article that the residents are concerned with is Article 4, and 4A is the town's budget. And I'll let Mr. Ullucci kind of give an overview of how we ended up on the town budget side.
So as always, and thank you for having us, George, it's going to be an exciting night because we know it's going to be a long one with so many articles. The town budget over time, you know, in the couple of years I've been here, that's always a concern. Where are taxes going? How much of a percent increase are we looking at on our taxes? And the guide we received from the Board of Selectmen was to come in at 2.5%. Which is very difficult given all of the things that take place. We had the new middle school. We took on that debt about 2 years ago, and now that is being reflected in the levy. When it was all said and done, we met with department heads. A&F met with department heads. We met with the board several times on things we wanted to increase and decrease. It's always difficult when you have departments that are just trying to keep up with software programs, training, and they want to stay competitive. We're in a difficult market where the employment pools are shallow at this time, and we want to make sure that we're giving the citizens the best that we can. After all this hard work and a lot of savings that came from changes that we made in our medical plans, we came in at that 2.5% increase. So as far as the tax levy itself that we tax residents with, we are at that 2.5% increase, which we're looking at approximately on an average home of about $480,000 will come in at around just under $200 for the entire year next year.
And just so people understand what the tax levy is, because the average person might not, we have all of our expenses, then we minus out any of the other revenues that aren't taxation. You know, Chapter 70 money that we get from the state, vehicle excise tax, hotel tax, restaurant tax, any of those other revenues, interest income, and then whatever is left over from that, that's what we have to collect from taxation. So, you know, while the growth in expenses is a little bit higher. Town side, we came in at 1.1% increase. School came in at a 3.5% increase. And then we've got some of the regional schools. We came in a little bit higher, but you know, new growth is part of that number. And with our new growth number, that brings it down to 2.5%. So the average resident should see about a 2.5% increase in their tax bill.
This is probably the lowest budget increase we've seen in a long time, right?
Yes, I would agree with that.
And it's 4 years on the board, but I mean, you know, in the 4 years I've been here, yes, I mean, I think we've done, and Mr. Ullucci and his team have done a tremendous amount of work over that time. I mean, when I got on the board, we were in a $3.5 million hole from using regional greenhouse gas funds to buy down the levy every year. So as soon as we started budgeting, we were already in $3.5 million behind, and then we have whatever growth and expenses. So, you know, we've kind of worked our way off that. Last year, you know, we deliberated as a board and ultimately decided not to use any free cash money. That, you know, we have to be able to stand on our own 2 feet and fund, you know, the operation of the town based on the budget. So, again, a lot of work on this budget by Mr. Ullucci, by his financial team, to bring in the town side. And within that, to Mr. Ullucci's point, there's individual, you know, budgets that are higher due to, you know, on the police side, new collective bargaining agreement, new, you know, the cost of the software for the body cameras and tasers. But, that's offset by some departments that, were able to come in much below that 2.5 number.
And this will be the first time that the budget does not have that infusion of whether it's Reggie funds, free cash, overlay, some money that is artificially decreasing the levy. So this budget represents kind of a reset to that. There is no money that is that is paying down the levy in any way. So next year, department heads in the town itself already know what that 2.5 number will look like without looking ahead to, okay, we used $1 million out of free cash, now we're $1 million or more in the hole going into the next budget. This is the first time that's been accomplished in years.
And again, you attend the selectmen meeting, the town meetings, and there's obviously been discussion over the last couple of years of, well, we've got all this money, free cash money, stabilization money, why don't we use that? But instead of having to be so tight on our budgets, why don't we use that money? And we've talked about it numerous times. It is tempting to, again, technically I'm a politician, but it's tempting to say, hey, let's make everybody happy and we'll just use this money and it'll be somebody else's problem down the road. But it's just not fiscally responsible to take that approach. And we really need to be able to operate within that budget, because when you deplete those funds, two things on the stabilization side, to the point that Mr. Ullucci has made, we make interest income off that money, about $500,000 a year. So as you're depleting that, you're depleting your interest income, which is increasing the levy. So now you're down to $5 million over the course of a few years, and you're only getting $250,000. You can't use stabilization anymore, and you've got another, whatever you used in stabilization, $1 million plus another $250,000 in lost interest income to make up for. So it's been a lot of work to get things to this point, and appreciate all the hard work by all the department heads, everybody on the school side, because again, we'll talk about a little bit later that there's still some impacts that hit us that are outside of our control.
And I would just comment on free cash very quickly, because it comes up, and I know I mentioned this before, it came up in the last special meeting in February, where someone had come up and they said, well, I don't want to see this project approved because I don't want my taxes to go up based off of that. But the allocation was out of free cash or unallocated funds that came from the previous budget, which could be money that wasn't applied to something that it was originally budgeted for, which is common, or it could be for unanticipated revenues if we had a great market and people were spending more money and we were receiving more money. That was money that we didn't anticipate it, we're happy to have, and then free cash or unallocated funds come in at the end of the year. And those projects, some of the projects that we'll be talking about tonight, anytime you hear that moniker free cash, they're important because they will not affect taxes. And free cash, these funds are very important in my eyes, in the town hall team's eyes, and I know the Board of Selectmen's eyes, because that's what we use to kind of reinvest in our community, whether it's water pipes, sidewalks, roads, buildings, roofs, whatever it is. We take that money that we're not sure what we might have, we try to match it to the capital plan, which is fluid, and we attribute that money, we assign that money to necessary projects. So it's very important. So when people hear, okay, we're going to spend this much money on a parking lot or a sidewalk project or some of the articles you'll hear tonight, that is money that we already have. So it's not going to affect the taxes and the tax levy. And it's important for all of the residents to recognize that the operational budget that comes from taxation is different from these projects that come from free cash.
And the free cash is money left over from prior year's budgets. It's unanticipated revenue, like you brought in more money from the excise tax because people bought more cars or whatever, and
So
it's one-time revenues.
yeah, so a perfect example, again, Mr. Ullucci being proactive, the old gas station that was on the corner of Slates Ferry Boulevard and Brayton Avenue, that prior to Mr. Ullucci coming in had sat there for a number of years with the taxes not being paid. and the taxes had accumulated into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mr. Ullucci, his team, went out, started the process of doing a tax title taking, so we would end up owning that property. That seemingly pushed the owners to make a sale and get the land sold, which got us, netted us about $400,000 in revenue that we hadn't budgeted for, because we didn't control that property. We had no way of knowing when that tax bill would ever get paid. But that brought in $400,000 that was unanticipated revenue. And, so at the end of the year, it was unanticipated. That $400,000 went to free cash. So numerous things, can be unanticipated both on the revenue side, and then expenses can come in under budget. When you're talking about, $70 million worth of expenses, even, 1%, which is, really tight, there's another $700,000 pickup, so.
Well, why don't we segue into the articles that we'll be using free cash for? I know that the town office building is one of them, right?
Yes.
Project for that.
So the town office building is important. We had received 2 quotes, which varied, and it was a combination of both windows and HVAC systems. The building's old, as everyone knows, and about 25-ish years ago, there was one side of the building that received newer windows. Those are dated, and then the majority of the windows are the original windows. So that certainly brings about, heating issues, energy savings issues, and we saw it with the, when you consider just the library. When we transitioned to more energy efficient units on just the electrical side, we saw the savings that we're getting in electricity. And these are the types of monies that they're very important. The town hasn't traditionally put money into its buildings, but we're reaching a point where it needs to be done. So when you consider the bones of that building, they're really good. The building is structurally sound. So let's continue to invest in that and get a longevity out of that, where we're not even looking at entertaining a new safety complex or a new town hall, anything like that. So for this particular project, $1.5 million is a lot of money, but residents need to recognize that last year we were very conservative. We wanted to make sure that we had a good, balanced, fair budget, and we carried about, I want to say, $3.5 million over from the previous year, specifically for these types of projects. So that yielded us around $7.5 million of free cash. And you look at Swansea did something similar, where they were saving money over the year, and they had, I think, $15 million that they ended up putting towards the new construction that they're working on, the library there in Swansea. So it's not dissimilar from what a lot of communities do. But that 1.5 million, we had a quote at 1 million, we had a quote at 1.5, and we're hoping that it's below the 1.5, closer to the 1 million. But these are the types of projects that are important. We put that money into the windows, we put it into the HVAC, we reduce the carbon footprint, we reduce the electrical costs associated to that. So whether it's electric bills, heating bills, gas bills, we hope all of those things come down, and we're extending the longevity of that building so that we can continue to use it without any further issues.
And I think the important thing, again, just like, we've developed a plan to work our way off of using free cash and, trying to control the growth and spending from a budgetary standpoint. We've also come up with a capital plan that we didn't really have before. So we have a 10-year capital plan, and we need to invest in these buildings. Over those years that we were getting money from the state regional greenhouse gas money, we didn't invest in the buildings, which ultimately caused Old Town Hall to be shut down by the building inspector, because it had gotten so dilapidated that the toilet was falling through the floor in the bathroom. So it's we need to start making these upgrades, because they haven't been done in a long time. And on the other half of the efficiency in Town Hall is not just the windows, but it's the upgraded HVAC system. So by putting in a variable refrigerant flow system into Old Town Hall, when we're, that boiler that's in there is original to the building. So not an incredibly efficient, boiler, but when we're in those shoulder months, not January, February where it's bitterly cold, where we're still gonna need the boiler, but, when we get into these months of, October, November, March, and April, where, hey, we need some heat, that type of a system can provide heat. And rather than having to start up the whole boiler, let it heat up and everything else, we can provide heat, which you probably only need during the morning, and then by the afternoon it's warm enough and you don't really need it. So two great things to get done at Town Hall that I think will create some energy efficiency and, to Mr. Ullucci's point, extend the useful life of that building.
And these things are all interconnected. I find it fascinating that when you consider the 1.5 million and we were using that money, or up to 3 million out of free cash to help pay down the levy. When you have a reset in the budget, it's all connected. So now you have those funds that were coming in before that you can invest without having to worry how much you might have to put or apply to the budget. So I do find it interesting that those items are all connected. But yeah, the town hall is like a time capsule itself. You walk into the basement and there are still some knob and tube panels on there. So there's a lot of things. Whenever you take these upgrades, if you have an opportunity, whether it's to upgrade the electrical panel, which can be dated at the time, you're future proofing for years, or in many cases decades to come. So it's always great when we can now take money that we didn't have available to us before and put it into our buildings, put it into really the economic development of our community. And I feel that the residents understand that when we've been putting these projects before them, they have been overwhelmingly approved, whether it's the library HVAC system or any of the other items such as the transfer station and the scale that they approved last year. So the town's anxious to get these projects going and reinvesting in itself.
Now, you guys would never believe this, but there was a time maybe 15, 20 years ago where every once in a while they would have a selectmen's meeting down in that basement.
Wow. I had heard that. People had talked about that.
Wow. It was that like, hey, we don't want any of the public to show up, so let's put it down in the basement where nobody will go.
It was when they didn't have enough room for because they used to have all the meetings upstairs in the conference room.
Yeah.
And when they didn't have room in there, they would go downstairs to accommodate everybody.
Wow.
But,
hey, I do just want to jump back to the Greater Fall River Vocational Technical High School budget, diamonds. So again, when you're looking at the growth in taxation for the residents, so because of the debt service on the construction of that school, their budget went up 3.9% this year. So again, as we're trying to balance, the K-8, the Somerset Berkley Regional, the Bristol Aggie, and this diamond budget against, with the town budget, and try to come in with a number that's reasonable. I think it's important for people to understand, these are some of the challenges that we could be up against, that, again, outside of our control. Again, voters approved this and all the communities that participate, but there's a cost associated with doing that. So it's about a $706,000 increase on about a $1.8 million prior year budget. So again, if we didn't have that, if it was kind of a normal year of growth for them, there'd be a little bit more money available to spread out among some of the other departments. But just some of the planning that goes into how do we try to get to that 2.5% number.
Mr. Ullucci, you mentioned the public safety complex, and there is an article on the warrant for an engineering study, and we could use free cash to pay for that as well. Can you talk about that article?
Sure. So that is something that the fire chief has put forward, and it is an important article because he's kind of looking at it from the 35,000 foot view, in the sense that, okay, if we have an engineering firm that comes in and they look at the building in its totality, how will the electrical circuits work, how the piping's working, how will, some of this stuff was installed decades ago, so how quickly will they break down? what type of products were used, what might have to be mediated, whether it's through new restrictions in state and federal laws when we go to mitigate some of whether it's asbestos or some other prior chemical or substance that we were using that has to be disposed of correctly. This type of article, and I hope it's enough. I give the chief credit for coming in so low. Usually those are a little higher, but they'll give a good temperature of, okay, if we are going to keep this building, here's what needs to take place, here's the order in which we need to do it. And even if it's, well, this building will last us a number of years, but the recommendations, because of where the costs are and where they're expected to go over time, this would be the suggestion from this engineering firm, where in cases it could be, and we see that with a lot of the buildings, even when we were looking at Old Town Hall, when there was $900,000 to bring this thing down to studs and reconstruct it, or $1 million to just raise the building and then rebuild it. So those types of projects are very important because they set a path, they set a structure, they allow the community to be read in, the town's being transparent, saying this is the path, this is what we have to follow, this is what we have to do to get this done. One of the interesting things about that project is the building was never designed to take in, especially on the fire side, it's always been heavily one gender and not the other. So the building was never constructed with certain accommodations that need to be met now. So whether they're moving walls or, okay, if this office, can we reconstruct this? Can we, put in a separate bathroom here? Can we do something there? And the demand on our fire services continues to increase, which in relation to the building will have a further demand on that building. So this gives that kind of that larger blueprint and that path forward on what the town would have to consider or do when it comes to, okay, are we expanding the footprint of the building that we have now? Is it something that in 5, 10, 15 years we should look at reconstructing something completely? Or can we get into the walls, can we get into the buildings and kind of upfit it if the bones are good there as well? So that article is very important because it takes all of that stuff into view and provides that type of picture for the town.
And it's important from a planning standpoint for us as well. To Mr. Ullucci's point, what are the short-term things that we need to do here, right? Like, hey, we've got an article on here to redo the roof over the police side because, water's leaking into the roof. We're degrading the inside of that building by the water getting in. So, what are those short-term things to extend the life, to a point where, we hopefully have new revenues coming in through Braden Point and or Montauk. But, to the same extent, we don't want to be making those investments that don't make sense, that, if there ends up being an article to build a new safety complex 5, 6 years down the road, everybody's like, we just spent how much money putting, windows and doors and, roofs and now we're going to tear it down. So, we need to understand where we are today so we can plan for that future. Within our 10-year capital plan, where's this all the money that's needed for, whatever the complex is going to be, where's that money fit into that overall 10-year capital plan so we can continue to minimize the impact on taxpayers.
And to that point, what Mr. Smith and what we express often to the Board of Selectmen, and they have a really good understanding in it, is that we don't look at just the day-to-day, the year-to-year. We are looking towards those future items, and the 10-year capital plan is a good example because, and I've mentioned this before, where some of the debt on the high school begins to fall off around 2036, 37, and we know that we hope to have our pension plan in line. We're on a state program right now, which we expect to have fully funded by that same type of period, around 37, 38, right around there. The number actually, the years, they can't give a definitive year, but they know it's within that time frame. And that's important because we pay roughly out of our town budget about $4 million into our pension plan annually. We pay about $2 million in OPEB costs, which we'll get to that article later, other post-employment benefits. And we're on a path to have those items funded so that there'll be a self-actualization in those programs where the pension plan's a good point, because that number, 80% of that dollar amount will fall off in that year. So when we start planning for the future, whether it's, and I'm not saying we're going to build another safety complex building, but those are the things that we need to line up and we need to look at. We can't look through things when it comes to our budget and our town through a straw. We need to look at that larger picture, and we do. And if we're able to connect those dots and decrease the impact on taxpayers at that time while being able to fund these necessary investments, it's an important piece, and it's something that we do at Town Hall.
And one of the other things related to the fire department, there's an article on there for new garage doors.
Yes. So the garage doors are interesting because they have a very small budget when it comes to repairs on the public safety building, and something that we want to increase. So you're constantly repairing these things. Eventually, whether it's the belts, the pulleys, the wheels, I watch this Precision Garage commercial like every day comes on with the news, and I'm thinking to myself, I know exactly where we could use you. But those items are important because, look, we can't afford for a door not to go up when an engine or rescue has to go out, and we can't afford one of these things to get stuck in the wintertime, and now we're waiting while it puts everything else at risk that needs to be in a controlled environment within the building. So those are the type of necessary investments, and through good contracts, through warranties, and we decrease the amount of money that we have to put back into it is a great investment.
In talking to Chief Barrows, and we're so fortunate to have him as the fire chief. His level of concern for the residents of the town is so high, and all of the decision making that he makes is geared towards how do we provide the best service possible. And when it comes to the fire trucks and the rescues, it's all about how can we improve the time that it takes to get to people who need our services. And if you've been there when the garage door goes up, it's kind of the old-fashioned garage door that it goes up in segments, and it's a little slow. That's why you'll see during the nice weather they'll usually have the garage door wide open, because they can just get out right away. They don't have to wait for the door. These new doors will be much quicker, and I didn't really understand it when I first became a selectman until I went down and I spent some time there, but seconds matter when it comes to trying to save somebody's life. And when you're sitting at home having called 911, and we did have two people and their families come into a selectmen's meeting, both of whom had had heart attacks. Luckily, one of the members of our police department was the first on scene, started CPR right away. But seconds do matter, and when you're sitting there saying, but where are they, well, we're waiting for the garage door to go up, that would be heartbreaking. So, again, to have, much better time, with the doors not being out of service, and then to the same extent, to be able to improve our response time, I think is very important.
Yeah, that's really a need as opposed to a want, which we talk about a lot.
Sure, yes, yeah.
Okay. And I mean, one of the things you just talking about costs with pensions and everything is the health insurance was an issue this year as well. But it's a little better than we originally thought it was going to be.
It was. So last year, we were able to make adjustments to the health plan program where we weren't able to realize those savings on July 1st just because of the way the timing goes, the budget and town meeting. But this year we'll be able to realize the work that we did last year. And that's important because throughout the Commonwealth, there have been huge increases. And our consultants, Gallagher Consulting Agency, they're in, top shelf in their field, and they had talked about some towns were looking at a 50% increase. We were looking at a 30% increase. Healthcare is always a major conversation, especially with our bargaining units. they work very hard to establish fair wages for their entire body, and they want to know what the bottom line is. What money are their employees bringing back? And then you have this outlier that's in effect healthcare that everyone's waiting for year after year. What are the impacts? And when those impacts are high, they can affect bargaining. They can bring down the total value of maybe what they thought they were bringing back to their people. Now, we still have a great healthcare program. The changes we made, people were able to stay within their health plan and keep the same coverage, but we were able to reduce those costs. And we were looking at that 30, we were able to bring that to roughly about 9.9 or just under. I'll use 10% as a safe number. And now we know exactly what that number is. We know what the number is that it will affect employees, will affect the town side. And that's separate from the savings last year. So these increases are going to keep taking place. They're going to keep going up. We saw that the GPL1 shots were costing us nearly $1 million. And it's something that's just not sustainable. And it's difficult. It's difficult for those decisions to take place. It's something that communities throughout the Commonwealth are now dealing with because it's so new. It's a newer medication. It has received a lot of attention. Even there seems to be an effect when you have Hollywood and certain stars kind of promoting this, and it reverberates through our healthcare program and what we can afford. So healthcare is always very difficult, and it's interesting because we saw the President of the United States, he signed an executive order on Monday, and he's trying to bring these certain prescriptions in line. What I find interesting about the United States is you have a lot of nations that set that level on how much a medication could cost, but here in the US it's not the same. They're allowed to judge the market. So you have big pharma, these big pharmaceutical companies, they're gauging how much they think the US market can handle or absorb a certain price, which is difficult for us. So we don't have that. So how that might find its way at the local level and how that might impact us, I don't know. I hope that some of these changes bring down some of these costs, and that's what's happening. Every year we know that the cost continues to go up, and we hope that the number of claims comes down. We need a healthy employment body. We need to set up these wellness programs where if we can do things, if we can incentivize programs where people are taking care of their health, that's less of an impact, less claims on our health insurance, and those are the types of things we want to look into right now.
The interesting point is, it's great, right? It was going to be a 30% increase, it's down to 10. Everybody's like, whew, okay, we're safe. But a 10% increase in the health insurance line is still around $1 million.
That's right.
Right? So that's a $10 million, which is a big line in our budget. You're growing that by $1 million. So when you look at how do we get to 2.5%, it's the prior year levy times 2.5. So that's about $1.7 million, $1.25 million. Then plus new growth, which is about $500,000 this year. So you're at $1.75 million. You just took $1 million of what you can grow expenses. So, even though we got it down to 10%, and great work by Mr. Ullucci, finance team, insurance board, that, again, took a year, to realize the benefit of it. But, it's still a huge risk on the town side, and it does eat up a significant portion of the growth in expenses.
The changes we made last year in reducing from 30 to 10%, and Mr. Smith kind of mentioned the formula there, and it's attributable based on that $10 million. We saved about $4 million over the last 2 years just in healthcare costs, and that was the biggest driver on how we were able to keep taxes at only 2.5%. It's something that, God, I wish we could pull off every year. We won't be able to. But the work doesn't stop here. And one of the things, and I'll take just a short opportunity to mention this, because I have been talking up an HSA program, a health savings account program, and these are becoming more common. There's something that I'm familiar with because with my previous work, we took a body and we switched the entire body over to an HSA program. And there was a lot of learning, and there were some bumps in the road. Now, it's something that we want to set up so that people have the option within our employment field or our employment pool to go to an HSA program. And in some communities, and I'll mention Attleboro because they came up recently, they're offering an HSA program to their employees now where the town is funding 100% of the deductible that first year, and then 50% for years 2 and 3. That's important because people will ask, well, if they're paying for the deductible, how the heck are there any savings? With an HSA program, the premiums can drop so much that the town or city can have a realization that, geez, we're saving so much on the premium side that we could fund this at 100%, 50%, 75%, and still have savings. And that's an important piece for young families that are healthy, that don't use a lot of services. If the town or city is putting that money up, and let's just say the deductible is $2,000 and the town is paying 50% of that deductible, which is similar to what the plan is going to be on a family plan for July 1st for our employees. They would pay about $1,000 in their deductible towards a family plan on July 1st. Now, that's important because if we watch the premiums come down, they were paying the $1,000 anyway, and the town is paying the other $1,000 of that $2,000 deductible because now they're on an HSA program. There's a huge savings on the town side, and there's no real, it doesn't feel different to the employee because that's what they were paying anyway. Now, if you're a young family where year after year we're paying that, so I'll continue with the 50% analogy there in the $2,000 deductible that I'm just using loose numbers at the moment. If I'm not going to the doctors, or once in a while I am, or I'm only using several $100s, someone who's paying attention to that will know, okay, this amount of money that the town's giving to me, I can roll that over next year. And year after year, it rolls over into the savings account, and it builds there, similar to a Roth. And for myself and my family, when we got to a point where our daughters needed braces, we were able to use that account to pay for those braces. And it benefited us. Now, there are always bumps in the road. There's a card involved with it. It's almost like a credit card. So every year that gets charged, recharged in the sense money's put back onto that, usually the first couple of weeks after January 1st. It's a little bit of a bumpy road, and we would get notifications that say, please don't use the card yet because we're still trying to iron out all of these things. But the education that we could put into that program and the savings that could be realized are all things we're going to measure for next year. So we hope to kind of continue the work that we're doing on the healthcare side and opening this up potentially to an HSA program.
And then the Canna RX is another great opportunity to reduce our healthcare.
Canna RX has been great. You have these. It's funny too because we always talk about in the U.S. these name brands, and it reminds me of like the car you take to work. I don't care what symbol or moniker that thing is called by. If I start it up and it gets me to work and it gets me home, I don't need a name brand. And that's what's happening with Canna RX. So you have medications that come in from Canada, the United Kingdom, or Australia. Those are the big three that are associated to this program. And monthly, or how you set up your prescriptions, whatever's on that list, you're able to get a drug that goes by a different name but accomplishes the same thing. So sometimes they are 1/10 the cost. That is a huge savings. A pill that's $100 that you can get for $10 through Canna RX. And we left almost about $250,000, I want to say it was $230,000 on the table last year. So there was a big push this year. I had help from the school superintendent, reaching out to our largest employer, which is usually the teacher side, and hey, when you're receiving these notifications in the mail, it's not random. It's because there are medications that you could be eligible for, that you are eligible for, that you can get through Canna RX. And this has been asked. This is not something we can force people to do. So you have to be able to really, because then it would become bargaining. You have to be able to really sell the program and get people onto it. And I use the analogy of Fall River because they have over 90% of their employees and they're saving a lot of money. Now they're a much bigger city, so there's less money for us there, but we want to grab that. We want to grab that almost $250,000.
But I hope the residents see, the planning and the work that's going into every aspect of what we do on the town side. Again, a lot of people, we were talking sports before we came on here, but, hey, we win the championship, we're the champions, we don't have to work as hard. Went from a 30%, potential increase in health insurance down to a 10%. Mr. Ullucci and his teams are already sitting there saying, all right, what about next year? Like, how do we continue to repeat this? And it's the HSA program, it's the Canner RX program. Again, on a $1 million growth in expense, if you can cut $230,000 out of it, that's a huge impact. And at times when we're, with these departments and trying to get to a budget number that, we think the residents can afford, we're talking about $10,000. So to be able to, have that room within the budget to be able to say, hey, yeah, we can afford another $25,000 for this department that really needs it. This is how we find the money.
Well, some articles that maybe don't have to do with money, and I want people to understand this one because I did a story on it and it got shared and there was a lot of comments about it. The elimination of the sexual offender bylaw. Can you just explain why the town needs to do that?
So now I wish council the chief were here. In short, and I know this keeps coming up, but there was and I don't recall the court case, and I apologize for that. So you have different states that put in different laws, and you're always wondering where they might come out on the other end. And this is one of the laws that we would have hoped didn't go a certain direction, but it did. And this went all the way up to our judicial Supreme Court right here in Massachusetts, where a court case, in short, the Supreme Court of Massachusetts said, look, you can't decide, you can't dictate where someone, regardless of the offense, is going to live within the vicinity of whether it's a park or school or something else. And that's exactly what our bylaw did, because it's a little older and it was just reflecting what changes were taking place at that time, and said, okay, well, we want something at the local level that we can enforce. Well, a number of years ago when this went up to the Supreme Court and they decided, nope, that's not, no one knew that outcome would took place, but that's what took place. So now what you have is you have a bylaw that sits on the books. It's one of those things that, like, I don't always want to spotlight, but it is important to talk about because you have groups out there, as long as we're making the effort to make sure it reflects what the practice and what the law is, and whether we have an unconstitutional law on our books, which opens the town up to liability, and you could have groups that could come out there and say, look, we know you're not enforcing this, but you have it there, so we're suing the town of Somerset for X amount of dollars, and here's why. Because whether you know it or not, there are individuals, you're handicapping their freedom, and it always feels awkward, especially given my background and seeing some of the things on what these individuals may have been involved with. I know where I'd like to see these people be and living, but this is where we are. So, in short, we need to remove that. We need to repeal that bylaw because it is unconstitutional. And there is any group that could come in and sue the town, and we would lose that. We would lose that lawsuit.
It's not that we're not going to have anything. We're just going to revert to the state law. Yeah. Because the state law has proven that it is constitutional and that, we can get that upheld.
With what they have.
Yeah.
With what they, not certain footage between a park or a school or something like that, but the way that the way we post it, whether we're notifications, all of the systems that have been fleshed out through the courts at the state level, we're following the state law. We can't go beyond that with what we have. We need to remove that because of its unconstitutional liability exposure to the town needs to be addressed.
And there's another article on there related to door-to-door solicitors.
So that it's another item. The chief of police did a great job when he was first getting appointed this. He talked about kind of his platform, what he wanted to see addressed, and it's always someone like the chief of police who has so much time in that position, he gets to see in the trenches exactly what's affecting, the residents of Somerset and right in front of them. And this is one of those items that touches his office and his department often, because people will call, who is this person? I have a sign on my door, it says no soliciting, they're ringing the doorbell anyway. And that was another interesting one, because there's this fine line on, well, if I have the sign, well, then they shouldn't be going on the property. Well, why should they be allowed to do this anyway? And then we get into this, almost like these amendment freedoms, whether it's freedom of speech or something like that it brushes up against. So council's giving caution. Some of these things on the door-to-door haven't been tested, but no town wants to be the first, test subject because of the cost that's associated to that. So we go with the guidance from them. Like I said, there's nothing that's come out on the court side. This kind of bolsters it. It doesn't go as far as the chief, I know, wanted it to go, but at least it continues with these companies having to call in, register with the police department, so with that the department, the officers know they're out there, who they are. We see scams all the time, and in the past we've seen scams where, especially when they're done as a pair, someone comes up, they're wearing a vest that you could get for $2, and some hat that they found somewhere, and while they're distracting one person, another person is finding their way into the house or taking advantage of the resident in some way. So this just goes towards, we're not where we want it to be, but we just can't get there. But it just kind of enhanced the bylaw that we have now and kind of strengthens our ability to deal with these kind of door-to-door sales pitches.
The world's a little different place than it used to be when we had encyclopedia salesmen,
Yeah, that's for
vacuum cleaner salesmen. Some of us are old enough to remember those.
The full of brush man used to come to your house, sell you brushes. Yep.
And we also have several articles on here for the Community Preservation Act. I know you submitted one for the fitness park.
Yeah, so CPA funds and projects are always important. We have a dedicated amount of tax money that go to these. There are 4 different buckets, or 5 different buckets that they apply to. And one of them is the old boathouse at the waterfront park. We know that needs to be addressed. We shored it up a little bit last year to get us through the winter season. That was the purpose of the 2x4s, but we could measure the cracks. We could see that they were expanding. And if that were to come down, it's not something that would be grandfathered. It's given where that water comes in, whether it's a high tide or a very brutal storm, we can see that water backs all the way up over there, and there was damage done last year. It's not often that happens, but every several years we seem to get these larger storms. So the money there, $50,000 towards repurposing those bricks, that foundation around that building, and keeping and restoring what is a historical building that used to, they used to steam and warp the planks for the old wooden hulls of ships down there. So there's a lot of history and a lot of tradition that now the building itself, it serves as the point of contact where people can get pay for passes. It has restrooms. It's kind of the nexus to the boat ramp that we oversee, that the state runs right out of there. It's a very popular place, as we know. Even yesterday, I saw a lot of people with boats going down to the boat ramp. So that
See
money,
this place on the weekends.
right?
Yeah.
We have the spillover at Village School when it comes to parking them, and it's an important project that we need to have done. And then the second project that the town put was the fitness court, which Swansea has one, Fall River has one, and there are a lot of these courts throughout the Commonwealth, and they seem to really be popping up kind of towards the tail end of COVID. How do we kind of incentivize people to do things outside where they're not in these, these gyms or these facilities where they're on top of one another, everyone's breathing on top of each other. And that, Pottersville itself, we have larger plans too. There are other things. We want to put a walking path that goes around the perimeter of Pottersville. It's a great location. Our seniors, this particular fitness court is designed for where our playgrounds are 12 and below. This is kind of 13 and above. So you work at your own pace, you go at your own pace, It's something that we hope attracts people. It has ambassadors that will set up programs. There can be competitions, but it's, you know, these things come at a cost. With this program, we applied for a grant through the company and this National Fitness Program, and they have, or we've secured $50,000 towards this project, and we're hoping to secure the remainder of that money, which is $175,000. It is a lot of money. Our playgrounds have been more than that, and this is kind of something that affects almost 3/4 of the population, as opposed to a playground that might be less than 1/4 of our population. So we're hoping that it passes. I'm hoping that it passes, and we can continue to kind of sell the community with items like that.
And another one of the CPA projects for Pottersville Field is the bicycle park that the Recreation
Yes,
Department.
so I know the Recreation Parks and Recs wanted a bicycle and skateboard. It was kind of shrunk down to a bicycle park, and Pottersville is really an interesting place because it's right on County Street. It's a busy artery that goes right through the town, and it's so easy to get to. So when you see the 3 basketball courts, when you see, we just did the sidewalks over there, we just did the parking lots over there. If we end up doing this trail, we did which complements all these things. We just did the dugouts over there, the benches. We're working on the roofs over there. Last year we had the field addressed by a company. So the bicycle park there, and it's a small one for younger children. The Blue Cross Blue Shield fitness field. All of these things are kind of really highlighting and enhancing a location that's been underused, and it's right near the library. So
It's a nice visible location.
visible
It's
location.
awful.
I mean, we do the egg hunts over there when the weather's cooperating, but we'll be able to do more and more at that location, so we can kind of shift some of this pressure. For the longest time, we had so many things at Pierce Beach, and now we're expanding that, and we're kind of branching out to other fields and facilities and utilizing them.
And all those things you were just talking about go from kids to senior citizens.
That's right.
That's good. There's
That's
something
right.
for everybody.
Yeah.
And what's better than right in the middle where we have the town hall, again, you have the library, and then you have the Council on Aging building. Everything's right within that area, all within walking distance.
And then there's also the project for the bocce courts.
Yes.
That's for the
The bocce courts, I want to say hi to all my friends at the, I didn't realize we had so many bocce people in our community, and I think it's wonderful. I think they said the number was around, if I remember correctly, it was around 175
Yeah, there's a lot of people.
They have teams. It was great. They invited me to the VFW just to listen to them about the project, and the project's on town land. So if there's things that we can support, that we can enhance, what's better than that? And I thought it was interesting to learn. You always want to do a little research before you go to one of these events. And that bocce was number 3 on the list. It was soccer, golf, and bocce on the world when it comes to activities. And to learn that it goes all the way back 5,000 years ago to ancient Egypt, where there was a form of bocce, not something that formed in Italy itself, I thought was very interesting too. But yeah, so another project that isn't a lot of money, but it goes to, investing in our community, our folks, and I hope that one passes with you.
That league was actually started by a former town treasurer, Jim. You may remember Jim Healy. I don't know, but he
Wow, that's really
he was the
cool.
one who was big into bocce, and he started.
Well,
Yeah.
and the great thing with that one is you don't have to ask, will it be used,
Yeah.
right? Like,
That's right.
It's being used. I mean, you've got a lot of people who already participate and benefit from it. So we know that, if we make that investment, that, we've got a great segment that's going to be, actively down there and, enjoying, the investment that's being made.
And we also have some citizens petition articles that will be voted on.
We do.
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I mean, one is, to move the town election to after town meeting, and you probably know, I don't know, I believe it used to be after the town meeting, and then at some point it was moved to before the town meeting.
Yeah, somebody told me that. That was a long time ago.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I wasn't here at that
Oh, wow,
point.
okay.
When I first came here, and it was this way for a while, it was always the Monday before the town meeting. And then
Okay.
they changed it to April because they said, we don't have enough, for someone new coming in,
It's too
they don't
soon,
have enough
yeah.
time to get ready for town meeting.
I mean,
It kind of makes sense.
it's 3 years, that you have as a term, whether it's, in April or it's after town meeting. I mean, I don't really have a preference on that. I think, personally, if I decide to continue to run for office, I wouldn't mind it being a little bit later because it's kind of cold out there holding signs in March, on the corner of Buffington and 138. So if I could be out there in April or, early May doing that. My only concern with that one is, and I think we, saw it somewhat in this last election. You had a presidential election and then there was a big fall off, in the town election. If we have town meeting, we're gonna see that fall off from, the participation that we currently have. But by and large, I mean, hopefully that one won't cause a lot of debate because we need some faster articles in this meeting.
Yes.
And then we've got, increasing the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5. Not something that I'm personally in favor of. And, you might think it's odd that I would not be in favor of that because I've spent the last 2 years being outnumbered on the board, where there's, we're two people who were, more closely aligned with a particular mindset, and mine tended to be different. And that's not fun. It's not fun to be on a board where you're outnumbered 2 to 1. We have a number of other 3-member boards in town. Water and sewer is a 3-member board. Technically speaking, zoning is 3 members with 2 alternates just because of potential conflicts. So, listen.
It's come up in the past at town meetings. It hasn't been approved.
From my standpoint, if you're gonna go to a 5-member Board of Selectmen, it's gonna cost the taxpayers money. And it's not that it's gonna cost in what we pay the selectmen, because it's a pretty small amount of money. But, we're gonna have to give help to Mr. Ullucci.
Well, I know town administrators never support expanding boards of
Yeah,
selectmen.
and again, I mean, he's fielding phone calls from 3 people right now, right? Because residents come to us, and we're not the ones that are, reaching out to the department heads and trying to solve the problems. We're calling the town administrator. So now you add 2 more people, that's 40% more calls that he's fielding from the selectmen. And listen, it's not just, somebody's tree is falling down, can we get somebody over there? I mean, we're discussing, at budget time strategy and where are we, and, we need updates. So we can't have, the staffing that we have right now in town hall and expect that Mr. Ullucci is gonna work any more hours than he's already working. I mean, there's days where, I'll call him at 7:30 in the morning and then, talk to him about something, and then he's calling me back at 7 o'clock at night. I worry about all the time that we're gonna burn this guy out. We're lucky we hired a younger guy than somebody my age, but, it's just not reasonable. And when you look at Swansea, they have an assistant town administrator, they have an HR director, they have more staff than, what, we have here in Somerset. But again, we've tried to be incredibly conservative with our spending. But from my standpoint, if you're gonna go to a 5-member board, we're gonna have to hire an assistant town administrator to take some of that workload off our town administrator. And I mean, that's gonna run you, probably 130 to 150,000 when you include benefits, in that position. And, I don't think, from my standpoint, I see the benefit, right? Like, oh, well, if we have a 5-member board, then you won't have this 2 against 1. Well, no, you'll have 3 against 2 or 4 against 1. So, to your point, I know it's been proposed in the past, there's no selectmen who said, we need to put an article on. It came from, somebody on the school committee. I think you create more problems when you go to a 5-member board than you go to a 3, than when you have a 3. And, the other big negative I think that residents should be concerned about is that you now are allowed to have discussions outside of an open town meeting, an open meeting. Right now, we can't have discussions outside of an open meeting, and I
So
know
it'll be
there
a quorum.
right, because 2 people are a quorum, and I know there are people who think there's a benefit to having those discussions outside of the meeting. I personally do not, because I think you walk into the meeting with a lot of things already being decided, and I think I've seen that with other boards that I'm like, oh, this was already decided before the meeting ever happened. Some of the more heated discussions that happen in a selectmen's meeting is because we don't have those conversations beforehand. And I think residents should be very concerned that if selectmen are, hey, I'm talking to this person and that person's talking to that person, you're gonna lose, the independence that happens now in an open meeting. And then, go ahead.
One of the citizens petition articles that's directly related to this town meeting, I think, is the one having to do with a time limit and a quorum.
So another one that, wasn't proposed by a selectman, but again, I personally am opposed to this one as well. Just to give you an example, prior to, this meeting, I did sit down and go through, the last town meeting. I timed each one of the articles to try to get an idea of how long this meeting would last. And we have pulled the one article from this meeting, which was the Slates Ferry District article that, I think, Mr. Ullucci and I both thought would create a lot of debate. And we had kind of said, okay, we're going to anticipate like an hour for this particular article. But we were at 9.5 hours for an estimate. And that could have been more, could have been a little bit less. But that would have meant 3 annual town meetings based on this article. At a minimum 3, because then if you had dropped to less than 100 people at any of those meetings, now you need a 4th, meeting. And, we just saw at the last selectmen's meeting, all the work that our town clerk put into trying to have an alternate date in case we need to continue this current annual town meeting to a second day. But I think, we have people in place between our moderator, our clerk, our Board of Selectmen, our Town Administrator, who should be allowed to manage this process. My other concern with the quorum of 100 people, again, having watched that last annual town meeting, we started out with a crowd of about 450 people at the beginning of the meeting. And Mr. Pasternak, 3 hours and 10 minutes into the meeting, asked for a standing vote, just to understand how many people had chosen to leave, basically 3 hours into the meeting. We had gone from 450 down to 115. But that's okay to continue, even though you've lost 2/3 of the people who started the meeting. But if we went from 200 people down to 99 at the start of a meeting to some point, now you have to suspend the meeting. And, because we're not anticipating needing a backup date for a meeting, we don't have anything coordinated with school or, as to what date we can push that off to. And these meetings are about getting town business done, right? We talked about the articles, we've got budgets, we've got, spending of free cash to buy necessary capital equipment. I mean, when we're investing in capital equipment in this town, it's because what's there has failed. We're not, typically, saying, well, we got 3 or 4 more years with this roof, so let's replace it. No, it's needs to get started. And a lot of those things, we're doing it in May, town meeting, because, hey, school's closed during the summer, so we can get this done before the kids go back to school. If you have to push these meetings out, I don't think anybody is gonna wanna see their article being the one pushed to the end, and then potentially going into July without having, these articles having yet been approved. And I think you'll see a lot more, request to move items up on the agenda, because, hey, I wanna be on day one in that first 4 hours of the meeting. So that's just gonna extend even more time. So I understand, and I think the idea behind it is great. 4 hours, look, you're never gonna get done in 4 hours. And, I don't, 101 people is okay, but 99 is not, The people, if you have an article, and I think we saw it at the last special town meeting when I put a citizens article on to replace make the town clerk position appointed versus elected. I mean, we had a lot of people show up for the meeting, and I think it was unfortunate that that article got moved up, because we saw, as soon as that article got voted on, the people that were asked to attend to vote in favor of keeping it elected all got up and left. So, but if you have things that people are passionate about, they're gonna show up and they're gonna stay at the meeting. And, I think when you see it go down to 100 people, it's because, there's less interest and less, controversial articles that are gonna be considered at that particular point in time.
So you're gonna have a contingency for this meeting, that
Yeah, we
if
do.
it gets too late, it'll
That's right.
go to the 21st from the 19th.
That's correct. So the town meeting is Monday, the 19th at 6 o'clock in Somerset Berkley Regional High School auditorium. The doors are opening at 5. So again, the hope is that we get people there early. You're gonna have to get a clicker this time, which, I think we all think is gonna help speed up these meetings a little bit. Again, when you ask for a ballot vote and that passes, that slows the meeting down. I think we've looked at 45, 50 minutes for a ballot vote. If we can just use the clickers, and in 1 minute, that's accomplished, I mean,
That would be a huge savings of time.
huge positive. Even a standing vote takes some time, right? So just, hey, okay, 30 seconds, 60 seconds to cast your vote, whatever, the moderator deems appropriate, and we're done. It shows up on the screen and here's the vote. But you are gonna have to, check in, get your clicker. There is gonna be, kind of a little bit of a demonstration. Our clerk, Caitlin Adala, will be at the selectmen meeting Wednesday night doing a presentation, so hopefully people tune into that. And, the other point that I think I wanna make, just trying to reduce the time of these meetings, and look, I was guilty of it before I became a selectman. Take the time to try to get educated about the articles, right? If you have questions, Mr. Ullucci's door is open more than I think it should be open, but, residents just, stop in and wanna ask him questions, and he'll never say no. Reach out to the selectmen, reach out to the town administrator, the finance.
Even just the descriptions they put on the warrant before, that helps to simplify things too.
It does, and those are on the town website, plus I think 7 locations around town that you can pick those up. But I think, if, again, I typically hate going back and rewatching a meeting, just because, I don't like listening to myself. But, having done that, it really kind of highlighted, certain things that, people getting up and asking questions that, Mr. Ullucci has to get up and answer, the town attorney has to get up and answer, a member of the Board of Selectmen has to answer, that, listen, we want people to be informed, we want them to understand what they're voting on, but, if they could do a little bit of outreach in advance, it just helps with the timing of the meeting.
The other citizens petition article, which we have had in the past, relates to discontinuing adding fluoride to the public water supply. So that's another, we'll be voting on that.
We will, yeah. So to your point, that's been on there. There's a group in town that's pretty passionate about having that removed. I personally would like to see it on a town ballot. Let's get it on the election, because from the research I've done and the conversations I've had with people, that's how it got put in the first place, right? It was an annual town election when our offices were running, and there was a ballot item to vote whether or not we should remove fluoride. So I would like to see a ballot item. I think it's an important issue, but I think I'd like to see a wider audience voting on that than people who are attending a town meeting.
Brian just gave me the signal that it's almost time to go. So before we do, I want you to give me your prediction on the one small article that we would never guess would create a lot of discussion, that's going to create a lot of discussion, like the hen law that Lucia talked about the other day.
Oh, boy. That's a lot of articles to pick out. I know a smaller article is the sidewalk article, and I'm hoping that doesn't create a lot of questions. And when you look at what we've done with the sidewalks, I don't know, when you do a stretch, how often does a town do a stretch of sidewalks? Probably not often. So when we see that replaced, we're always impressed with how nice it looks, and they do look great. So the purpose of this was, we had used ARPA money for those projects along Riverside, along South Street, and now we have an opportunity to take some of the money that we have from free cash and kind of keep that going. And I know, there have been sidewalks that have been pointed out, whether it's Brayton Point Road or some of these other locations. This gives us that ability. So I'm hoping that it doesn't create a lot of questions and kind of a tug of war on where these will go. It's kind of like the demand when it comes to our roadworks project, when it's, the road that needs the most attention is what we're trying to focus on. And that's what we hope to continue to do with the sidewalks. But the sidewalks are a good investment into economic development, and we kind of just want to keep it going.
I should know better than to ever let Mark go first, because he stole my answer. I initially had said, we're going to put $500,000 into more sidewalks, but again, when Mr. Ullucci explained it the way he just did, we have, we see what a huge difference Riverside Avenue is, and if we can do that with some of our other sidewalks, they desperately are in need of upgrades. So I think it makes sense. So I'll pivot to the established economic development side and facade program and business incentive grant, $250,000. This has been a project that economic development has discussed for a number of years. It's finally was ready, and it's on there. And it's a matching program that, we've got that corridor along 138 that has some older buildings that, one company goes out, another company comes in, they basically take the sign down, put it back up. But we'd love to enhance. That's our main street, even though Main Street is down here in the village. But that's really the main street of our town. And so we'd love to be able to enhance that, so when people from outside of Somerset drive through, one of the things that so impressed me when I first started working in Somerset for CBS, 50, 60 years ago, not quite that long, but I drove down 138 was our old high school, and I'm like, wow, what a beautiful building this is. It really makes Somerset look unique, and we'd love to see some of our businesses get upgraded. You look at what Society did with that old building, right? And their business model, they were able to make that work. They didn't need help. But some small businesses, this might make the difference of them coming to Somerset versus not coming to Somerset, because some other community offers this incentive. So I think there'll be some debate. Why should we give business owners money? What if Dunkin' Donuts decides that they want to apply for a grant, they don't need the money? but it'll be run by economic development. I mean, it'll be vetted through them. This is really to help small business owners that are, and to enhance the look of our community.
And it's a great example of carrot versus stick. So you have this carrot approach where the town, because you're using these monies, we are allowed to set up how the money will be distributed. So if there's certain things that people want to see, the way a placard or the way the sign is designed or the way the number on the building, because I can't tell what address that is, we could set up certain requirements that they would have to, that forms kind of a uniformity that kind of meets what people are asking for. And when you have that ability too, it just kind of enhances the project overall. So when the margins are so thin on some of these businesses and you give them the ability to kind of, like Mr. Smith said, gentrify or revitalize that storefront, the image, the face of the building, that's an important piece. And when the town can kind of say, well, make sure these are set up this way, or that the number can be easily seen, it's a reflective this, or however that is, without making it too restrictive. I think that's a great partnership where there's planning and there's a vision for the town, and the businesses are coming in and they're following the lead of what the town's vision is, and it's being accomplished
Kind of
together.
like all those wooden signs down the Cape.
Yep.
They kind of look like.
When you consider Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, where they're right down to picking the color of your building, we won't go that far, but you can see how restrictive some of those places can be.
Okay, well, I'm sure we could talk about this warrant for like another 8 hours.
I'm sure we could, Judge.
We gotta go. So thank you for
No.
coming in and helping to educate people about what's gonna be happening at town meeting. Town meeting is on May 19th in the Dr. Robert Perry Performing Arts Center at Somerset Berkley Regional High School, starting at 6 o'clock. The doors will open at 5 o'clock, and the town clerk is encouraging people to come early to learn how to use the clickers. We will see you next time on Somerset Showcase.